Turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Greetings once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech, and I'm back with the Pioneer SX1010 that has a right channel issue. And I did a few videos just recently. I had to step away for a short period, as I mentioned in the last video, because I had to attack several pieces of equipment, and I mentioned I was going to be jumping back and forth, and that's what I've been doing. Lots of equipment to work on, so I'm back at it now, and I'm still in the troubleshooting phase of sussing out that right channel issue. So you'll notice, well, first of all, over to the right there on the display, I'm monitoring both channels once again, and I'm doing that because I'm going to get into a little more detail about that, but I want to see if there's any changes as I go through and manipulate the right amp channel board there. Okay, and I'll zoom in on that in just a moment, but there's some things I have to get into to provide some insight for the customer. And as always, for those of you that like to go along for the ride there, by all means. But this isn't going to be one of those videos where I'm pulling out components, putting new components in. Not at this point, because there's more going on that I discovered with this receiver here that I need to get into, again, to provide some insight to the customer, because there's going to be some decisions that have to be made. And again, I'm working within a budget. A lot of folks that might be tuning in, especially more experienced individuals, might say, well, it's pretty simple, do this, do that. You have to rebuild those amp boards and the power supply, and you should go in and do a full recap and all that. Well, if it was my receiver, perhaps, but not on somebody else's dime, on somebody else's budget, unless that's what he's going to want to do. But also too, I wanted to really hone in on what I believe the actual problem is, and then we'll talk about it. He'll make some decisions. If he decides he wants me to go in and do this, do that, fine. Does a receiver need all that? Absolutely. All of this equipment, as I often touch on, and I also often repeat, all of this decades old audio equipment needs a lot of work in order to bring up the reliability, improve the audio fidelity and all that. There's a lot that can be done to squeeze out the best performance possible in all of this gear. So I'm not going to get into that, but it's true that this receiver needs a lot of work. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I'm going to show some other things as well. But what I'm getting into right now in regard to the customer complaint, that right channel issue, is what I need to focus on right now, because there's been some changes. And let me go ahead and reposition the camera and zoom in a little bit more on that board there. Okay, so you can see we're angled so that we have more of a back of the board view here, and obviously I removed the board from its mounting plate, which I will bring into view here. Okay, so I liberated it from its mounting plate. During the time that I yanked the board loose so that I could access the backside and start doing what I have to do as far as attempting to suss out the intermittent behavior that we were experiencing in the other videos where we saw the right channel waveform cutting in and out. Okay, because of course I was hooking onto the board and going through the signal path to find out where the problem starts, where it ends, and all that stuff. The usual stuff when you go through and do such things as measure the various voltages, compare with factory spec, and I'll talk about that a little bit in just a moment. So I'm not going to manipulate the board around because I have the unit on right now, so I'll wait until I shut it off and all that, because I don't want to short something out or whatever. So But during the time that I was freeing up the board so I could gain access and do what I have to do, of course I had to maneuver the wires around and negotiate a little bit of slack so I could pull it a little bit more, you know, forward that way a little bit, get to the backside, tweak around. And, you know, there's wiring around back that comes through those, you know, knockouts. You see the knockouts in the chassis. From underneath, in other words, there's wiring that connects to the posts on the board, and then there's the wiring on the top here. And you have to kind of negotiate it out of, you know, or coax it out of the channel here. You know, it's all kind of routed in the channel here and all that. So during that time, there's a lot of manipulating of the wiring going on, and, you know, getting the board out and all that. So why am I bringing that up? Well, because after I did that, of course, I was going through the board, and let me go ahead and change views once again. Okay, so to my left over here is where I have my my magnetic board here, my little, I guess, dry eraser board, so I can jot down information. And let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit better here. Okay, and let me get slightly zoomed in here. And I know some might say, well, hey, Retro Ernest, why don't you get modern and set up a computer monitor near your bench there and pull up PDFs and all that stuff? But nah, that's not for me. So anyways, I was going through here, as you can see, you know, I pin up my, you know, I have magnets here, so I just kind of pin up my schematics and get to it. So, you know, I was doing what we would normally do and, you know, go through the signal path and trace things out. And then I spent a great deal of time trying to sniff out the intermittent problem that we were having on that right channel, monitoring the channel, and lo and behold, nothing. The channel is completely rock solid and has remained that way for the last several hours that I've monitored the channel off and on. And of course, you know, I went through it forwards and backwards and was waiting it out, like I said. And I also was trying to recreate the problem. Now let me go ahead and switch views yet again. So at this point, it seems pretty apparent that we're dealing with a connection issue. I don't know what type of connection issue yet. I've tried to recreate it by manipulating the wiring around, using my non-conductive pointer here as kind of a fulcrum. And you got to be careful when you're doing that sort of thing. But, you know, sticking the poker there between the wiring and kind of maneuvering it around, trying to bend it around. Same thing with some of the components on the board, very carefully. I repeat, and just kind of move things around a bit, and so forth and so on, that sort of thing, and just move the board around while I'm monitoring the waveforms on the scope to see if there's anything going on, if I'm getting that intermittent behavior, if the waveform's doing what it was doing before. And the thing has held completely rock steady. And also too, was something touching when the board was of course mounted to the mounting plate? Was there something that was touching just slightly, or whatever the case? I don't know. You know, again, it's hard to say. When I reinstall things, I'm going to be very mindful of making sure that nothing's touching and so forth, as I always do. And that kind of goes without saying, but yeah, I've tried to recreate the problem as much as I could, you know, really going in there and probing around, and even the leads that connect to the output transistors themselves that are mounted to the heat sinks. I've gone in there again with my pointer and just kind of, you know, fulcrumed things around a little bit, kind of bending leads just slightly, just putting some pressure, in other words. And, you know, getting a little bit more aggressive than I normally do, because some of these connection issues, if they resolve themselves by, you know, when you move something around and they kind of resolve themselves and settle in such a way that they're just not easily going to lose connection again without really going in there and pulling on wires and, you know, flexing the circuit board. Again, being very careful. You know, you have to sometimes get a little bit more aggressive to get it to lose connection again, is what I'm trying to say. So anyways, the point is that sometimes you got to be a little bit more aggressive and kind of step it up a little bit when you're trying to bend connections around. But you have to know when enough's enough. You have to know kind of when to tap out and not go too far and, you know, crack the board if you're flexing the board around and so forth. So there's a few possibilities there, because I'm convinced at this point I'm dealing with a connection issue, because I've been monitoring you know, the signal long enough to where something should have happened. Unless it's gone completely intermittent to the point where, as I just mentioned, it's just not showing up for some reason, which I really doubt that to be the case, because, you know, this happened coincidentally after I pulled the board out. So, you know, 2 and 2 is 4. You know, those are the kind of things that you got to look at them as a little bit more than just a coincidence. And that's where I'm redirecting my efforts at this moment, is on a connection issue. So, like I said, I'm going to continue to try to recreate that. And I've even, you know, with my fingers have grabbed onto the wires and bent them. And because sometimes I've seen in cases, especially with this solid wire, sometimes when someone's been in there and they've moved stuff around and they've really bent the wire and all that, sometimes the wiring can break internally, physically break inside of the insulation, and then you have an intermittent connection. It's just barely kind of making contact, and it kind of breaks, and then it reconnects and kind of breaks and all that. So I tried to recreate that by going through and kind of bending the wiring around while, again, monitoring the waveform and all that, and just checking, again, even checking the posts on the board, you know, getting in there and kind of doing that fulcrum thing and see if I can kind of bend them just enough to where I lose contact. I do see on the back of the board some bad solder joints, that definitely need some attention. And again, like I said, I was flexing the circuit board and all that, but there's definitely some solder joints that have to be worked on. And in fact, in this kind of a situation, you should go through and just reflow all the solder joints. And that needs to be done on both boards ideally, because even though the other channel has been just fine, I don't know what the soldering looks like on the back of that board, but I know on the back of this board it doesn't look so good. So let me go ahead and change camera views once again and kind of hone in on that. Okay, so I'm not going to get into every little solder joint and all that and try to move things around too much, but of course the unit is powered off and I discharge the caps and all that. So anyways, but you can see, for example, like this solder joint here, okay, that's all cratered, and the one below it too looks like it's starting to crater just a little bit there. And you know, this one's not looking so good over here. You know, it's kind of that, yeah, it kind of has a real dull look, and it's kind of a little bit pitted. It has those small little pits in it, and it just, yeah, it just doesn't look like a healthy solder joint. And if you look up here, you know, there's this big blob here, and that has that kind of cracked look to it as well. It looks like a kid went in here with a Fisher Price soldering iron and did something there. I don't know if something happened to the trace there and somebody was trying to bridge the trace or something with a big blob. I won't know until I, you know, evacuate that solder and redo it and all that. And there's you know, these solder joints down here, they don't look so good here. And sometimes too, they're solder joints that they don't look really too bad at all, but when you look at them really close under magnification, like I did with this, I had this under magnification looking at it. When you have things going on that are related to connection issues, as I discovered with this, then you have to really take a closer look than you normally do. Like you have probably witnessed in my other videos where I go through and do that cursory evaluation and inspection, and I get my you know, my magnifier into the scene there and start breaking the board up into quadrants, you know, imaginary lines that I draw, and I'll take one little quadrant, examine it real good, another quadrant, another quadrant, another quadrant, and all that to make it visually digestible and all that, because sometimes, you know, looking at a bunch of solder joints on a board can be overwhelming for some people, but the little quadrant method I talk about helps things out. But anyways, I discuss that here and there, but yeah, you know, I went through and looked at this in a little more detail and just noted that there were quite a few solder joints that just don't look very healthy. There's more over here, and excuse me, yeah, like this one here is all, yeah, this is a really ugly solder joint, and there's a few others that look like they're just not adhered to the pad real good. They just look weak. So anyways, that's that. So yeah, in going through and performing a, you know, reflow on all the solder joints and checking all the connections, once again, all these posts, and especially getting those resoldered as well, and, you know, going through and just, I'm going to keep messing with the wiring and seeing if I could get a response, you know, get that signal to drop out. I'm gonna go through that in more detail. Again, this is what I discovered just excuse me, just yesterday, that, you know, once I pulled this board out, yeah, everything just sort of resolved itself. Everything is just fine. So, you know, there you go. And anyways, once I start going in here and doing some work, provided the customer is going to want me to you know, get into it deeper and really go into the level of work that actually needs to be done, then yeah, I'm going to get all these wires unwrapped from the posts, mark them and all that, so I can lay the board flat, do what I have to do, maneuver a little bit, because obviously these are kind of, I mean, I could get in there a little bit, but, you know, whatever. I don't want to put any more stress on the wiring than need be. So I'm just going to unwrap it, and probably both boards if he wants me to do both boards and all that stuff, and maybe even lift this heat sink up out of the way a little bit. I just want some, you know, better access than what I have now. Yeah, this isn't a problem that, you know, only pops up every once in a while. This thing, you know, it's very frequent, and we witnessed that in the other videos, how frequent the channel was bouncing around and dropping in and out. So I don't believe that, you know, this problem has just suddenly gone dormant and has become extremely intermittent. We have a connection issue going on is the point. So anyways, let me change views once again. And I also want to make quick mention that, as a matter of course, I always go through, especially when there's a problem of this nature, I always go through and check the various voltages at the different, you know, nodes and junctions and all that. And that's why I have my pad of paper here. I was going through and doing just that as I was going through the signal path, you know, sussing out the board. I was jotting down notes and monitoring the different voltages, and everything is looking decent there. Nothing is so far out of a tolerance that it would be causing that kind of a problem. Everything is actually holding pretty tight and is where it should be. I'm going to change, I'm going to move around back and change views here. Okay, and I'm around the bottom side, and we're looking at a power supply board that, you know, like a lot of these, gets really toasty. You can see the discoloration on the board pretty good. I don't think that's hard to see, but you can see all around here, you know, the discoloration. You have the big heat sink here. Things get hot. You can see the labeling on this can here retracting, and this is even starting to retract a bit around here. These are exposed to a lot of heat, and, you know, you could tell that this cap is running really hot, and they're just old caps. They're of that age now where, you know, they're starting to have problems. I'm sure if I was to pull that and measure the ESR of probably several of these caps, they would be pretty high. Some of them might even be off the charts, like the other, the SX1010 that I was working on recently, that went home, by the way. Yeah, I mean, you know, you saw how blazing hot those caps were getting, and the caps weren't even measurable. They were so far out of tolerance, they just weren't even measurable. And the I know on some of those caps, the ESR was in the was in the megohms, you know, and the capacitance was down in the picofarads and all that. They were just done. They were cooked, literally. So, and just in addition to the electrolytics that need to come out, I of course would need to go through and check the values of all these components, these other components, and make sure that these resistors haven't drifted far out of tolerance. Heat kills components. It causes them to drift way out of tolerance. So this is all stuff that, as a matter of course, should be done. So I'm bringing this to the attention of the customer as well. Right now, the primary focus needs to be on getting those amp boards squared away. So let me change views yet again. Okay, now we're looking at this side of the amp board right channel. So as I mentioned before, aside from an apparent connection issue, it doesn't change the fact that there are components on these boards that should ideally be replaced, substituted. So for example, you have these transistors here with the blue dot on the tops, these 2SA726s that have made their way to the poop list. And you got these 1451s, you have these light blue Sanyo caps, all of which are known to be problematic now that the equipment is as old as it is. They're starting to show their age by, you know, transistors, for example, getting electrically leaky, producing noise, and, you know, caps failing and all that stuff. And with electrolytic caps, regardless of whether they're the light blue Sanyos and all that, you know, if they've done their time and have, you know, been in a piece of equipment for decades, ideally they should come out. Does that mean that they're going to fail immediately and next week or next month or next year they're going to fail? Nobody really knows that for sure, unless they're showing imminent signs of failure. I think you should definitely be concerned about those power supply caps that I pointed out just a moment ago, because of the obvious heat stress that those are under. But anyways, moral of the story is, you know, in addition to going through and working out any sort of connection problems on these boards, yeah, it would be a really good idea. Let me kind of back out just a little bit. Yeah, it'd be a really good idea to get the at least the known troublemakers on these boards pulled. So again, let me go ahead and change views. Okay, so back to monitoring the scope once again. So anyways, I'm just going to pretty much leave it here. The customer is going to get the link. I'm going to talk to the customer, and that's about it. But I wanted to acquire some more information before obviously presenting the customer with what needs to be done, and that's what I was planning on doing. I had to step away for a little while, like I said, but you know, now that I, you know, was able to pull the board and examine it and go through the signal path and discover that something obviously changed for the better in one respect, in that we don't have that problem anymore. But why is that? And I haven't been able to recreate it or hone in on it exactly, but the evidence obviously points to some kind of a connection issue, or something was touching that shouldn't have been touching. But whatever the case, it's rock solid, and I'm just going to leave it at that, guys, and monitor things for a while, get with the customer, see what happens. If there's going to be a part 4 where I actually go in and start reflowing all these solder joints, changing out some components. Again, I still have to work on the work on the controls, pull the face off, get to the controls, do what I have to do there. So again, you know, I know the customer was hoping that it was going to be something kind of quick, you know, a wham bam, thank you Sam kind of repair, but that ain't the case, and I'm really not the man for the job when it comes to doing just band-aid work. I don't want to go through and do a full restoration only because of time, unless it's scheduled accordingly. But I also kind of feel bad if I go in there and just do a little quick Band-Aid repair, hand it back, it fails, he's unhappy, I'm unhappy, because, and I try to put out the absolute best meticulous work that I can. That's the way I roll, and I hate doing Band-Aid work when I know that there's so much that needs to be done. And if I can clone myself and get a lot more done and get all these restorations that people want me to do squared away and all that stuff, that would be fantastic. But you know, it is what it is right now in this day and age. But anyways, I've made some recommendations on what should be done at least, and that's about it. So as I always say, guys, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care.
This is a poor man's shoe production.